Some stories don't begin with ambition. They begin with escape. Today's guest was raised to preach, but something inside said no.
And then by the time I graduated college, I had a double major in Bible and church ministries and quickly realized that I did not want to do that.
So he left. But leaving comes with a price.
I had a mortgage to pay and I had a wife at home. I did not know what I was doing with my life.
And some people wanted him to lose.
They didn't want an example of success outside of the examples that they had shown to everybody.
But he kept knocking.
And he goes, check your phone. He PayPal'd me $200 for the course that I had not built yet. That was the easiest sale I'd ever made.
Now he interviews legends, but it started with no mic, just silence. This is Travis Chappell. Travis, welcome.
Dude, thanks so much for having me.
So today we have another fellow podcaster.
That's right.
Amazing. I'm going to go meta on this because we're still a small outfit and there's probably a lot that we can learn from you. So I'm going to be super humble to ask you questions.
Let's do it, bro.
Because a lot will benefit the platforms that you're working on and it can help us too. So welcome. You're known for the Travis Makes Money podcast, right?
Yes, sir.
And you're the founder of Guest Here.
Yes.
Okay. For those who aren't familiar with you, can you give us a little background and
Yeah, please.
kind of a story?
So I'll give you the 30,000 foot view and you can kind of go down whatever path you want to go down. So raised in Southern California, strict fundamentalist background. So I graduated kindergarten on the same campus I graduated 8th grade and high school and college.
What do you mean? What are you fundamentalist?
Yeah, like Baptist fundamentalist.
Okay.
Religious, very religious, yeah. So the church that I went to had a K through 12 school. The school was closed enrollment, meaning that only members of the church could send their kids to the school. And then there was a ministerial college on the same campus as well. So I went from kindergarten all the way through senior year of college on one 40-acre campus, which was also my church. So the path that was kind of forged for me was like full-time ministry. And then by the time I graduated college, I had a double major in Bible and church ministries. I was going to be a preacher, and quickly realized that I did not want to do that very quickly. And then didn't know what to do because basically, I don't know if you've ever tried to get a job with a Bible degree, but there's not really a bunch of employers lining up to give you work. And mine was even more useless than a regular Bible degree because it was unaccredited. So I had gotten married to my high school sweetheart right before I graduated college. And then I bought a house right after I graduated college. So I was at a point where I had a mortgage to pay and I had a wife at home and I did not know what I was doing with my life. So I basically did the only thing that I knew how to do at the time, which was door-to-door sales, because that's what I did in college to make extra money. And it seemed to me like a better path because I was just like, I feel like I would rather do 100% commission door-to-door sales than go work for some random company sitting at a desk working for somebody that I didn't respect, getting told what to do, making whatever, $30K a year, whatever that would be. And I was just like, well, this door-to-door thing seemed like a better option. So I did 100% commission door-to-door sales for a few years after college. And it was going well. I was making six figures doing that as a 22-year-old, 23-year-old. But I also had enough foresight to know that I didn't want to do that forever. So at the time, it was kind of counterintuitive because now at this point, I have a degree that I don't want to use, and I have a skill that I don't want to use, and I still have a mortgage to pay.
Quick question. Are you still part of your church? You just decided you didn't want to be a minister?
Yeah, at the time I was still going to church, right? Okay. My wife actually worked at the church.
Got it.
But so during that time I still was. Probably within a couple of years is when I stopped. And then she kind of kept going for a little bit and I wasn't going to church at all. And then we both kind of stopped after a couple more years. So it was a long, it's easy to say in 30 seconds on a podcast, but it was a long time of, questioning beliefs and reforming values.
All your community is there, right? So that's when you don't agree to those beliefs and those values,
you get kind of
you're extra.
Yeah, you get kind of excommunicated, ostracized a little bit from the community. There's basically like three groups is how I kind of look at it. There was a group of people that were like my actual friends who didn't care. They just want to see me happy. That was like a smaller portion of people. And then there's the other end, which were like people who were actively rooting against me because they didn't want an example of success outside of the examples that they had shown to everybody. And there's probably like the vast majority of people who just were completely neutral, that just didn't care. They were just like, oh, it's a bummer that Travis isn't doing this thing that we wanted him to do. But I'm not going to take any energy to make him do worse, you know what I mean? But I'm also not going to help him. So it was like, that's kind of where the initial podcast was born, because the podcast kind of came out of all of that, and it was called Build Your Network at the time. So it was kind of like me scratching my own itch. Like I knew I needed to go build relationships with people because I was essentially starting from scratch with relationships, because everybody that I knew in my life was kind of involved in that world to some degree. So I was starting from scratch. So Build Your Network for me was like a way to teach other people how to get in touch with people, but I wasn't doing any solo shows. They were all interviews because at the time I was like, I don't know anything about this. So all I really need to do is go get people who do know something about this and then ask them good enough questions that we can actually get into how you do this thing properly. And then that was kind of helped form my philosophy on my personal network, relationships, how I reach out to people, connect to people. And then, and then that's kind of evolved over the years. We did podcast coaching, consulting, podcast agency work, podcasting software, courses, communities, masterminds, retreats, all of the above in that world. And so that kind of catches up to today, where now we have two podcasts. The Build Your Network podcast went through a rebrand to Travis Makes Friends to be a more broad audience. So basically what we ended up doing is like we realized that the majority of the people who came to Build Your Network were entrepreneurs. So instead of putting Travis Makes Friends there, we actually recently just separated the feeds. So now we have Travis Makes Friends, which is more like broad society culture conversations with like UFC champs and comedians and authors and psychologists. Then we have Travis Makes Money, which is our business entrepreneurship podcast. And Travis Makes Money is a daily entrepreneurial interview show. So we do daily interviews on Travis Makes Money, and we do weekly interviews on Travis Makes Friends.
Cool. What I like is we were talking about this. I think a good podcast has to have a brain, right? Mm-hmm. So Travis Make Friends, try this. At least you're already presenting the mind of people to what it is.
Yeah, exactly. But during the rebrand, my producer knows how all over the place I am. And so he was really pushing me to be like, hey, just call it the Travis Chappell Show, because then you can just do whatever you want to do. And I just really shied away from calling it that, just because, like you said, it doesn't tell anybody anything about what the show's about at all. So we landed on a compromise, which was basically Travis Makes Friends. It was like, okay, we integrate my name in there to some degree, but also it gives us like a frame that tells people exactly what the show's about.
But in a way, you're already like piggybacking off that. You already had an audience.
You're correct.
Past,
Correct.
So that's very important. Cool, man. What are some good lessons that you took from your door-to-door sales that translate into podcasting and what you're doing now?
Yeah, easily the number one thing is just rejection. You deal with a high volume of rejection when you're going door to door. And from my perspective, man, and it's not even just my perspective, I think that it's also a lot of data from a lot of other studies and different people like that. We're talking about NPR before we hit record here. There's a show called How I Built This that's run by a guy named Guy Raz. And Guy wrote a book called How I Built This, which is basically like, here's all the things that I've learned from these, multi-billion-dollar founders that I've interviewed on the show. And I heard him, like when he did a book tour promoting that, I listened to him on probably like 4 or 5 different podcasts during that time. And inevitably, most of them would ask them the question, like, what's the number one, common denominator? What's the commonality between all the people that you've interviewed? And the one that he kept bringing up time and time again was their ability to overcome rejection. And I thought it was, really telling. And I think that there's large correlation to anybody who has an extraordinary version of success, like outsized success. They have an innate ability to move from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm, to move from rejection to rejection without losing confidence or quitting. And door-to-door is like a masterclass in overcoming rejection. It's like if you don't figure out how to do that pretty early on, like you're done in like 2 weeks. You know what I mean? Like the turnover is very, very quick if you can't figure that piece out.
Correct. So like rejection and wanting to have these big guests, and then they'll tell you no. And
absolutely, yeah. And it mattered more, at the time, because like going door to door is like, it's one thing when Joe Schmo slams the door in your face and tells you to F off. You know what I mean? But then when you start reaching out to people you respect and admire and want some of their time and things like that, and they say no, it's like, oof, that rejection hurts a little bit more, but it's still rejection. So I was just kind of used to it. And I think it provided a really useful frame, which is that it always takes more work than you think it does to get a large enough sample size to figure out what your numbers are. If that makes sense. Like a lot of people get this idea like, I'm going to start a podcast or I'm going to start this business idea. And they do it because they have like 2 people in mind. They're like, oh, so-and-so would be great, for this. And they reach out to so-and-so and they say no. And then they're like, well, there goes that idea. It's like, okay, well, try reaching out to like 150 people, not 3. Because it's always going to take a higher volume than you think it's going to take. And then during that time, what happens? You get better at doing the thing, whatever that thing is. So your numbers improve over time. It's just that most people don't think of it in a volume way. They think like, top of mind, I got these 3 people I'm going to reach out to. Those 3 people say no, then they're like, all right, well, back to the drawing board. You know what I mean? It's like, well, you probably should have reached out to a lot more people first before you made any executive decisions.
I think we're very lucky in that sense because now we have people reaching out to us, although we're not like going for superstars, right?
Yeah.
We're like, what I was telling Ivan the other day is I envision one day like dropping in, having the setup, and at Dana White's office where like says, Steve Wynn. We don't know where this will take us, but I think we're gonna get there.
It's all doable, man. The number one thing I changed my mindset at the beginning was just like, everyone is gettable. There's no, like, if they have a pulse, it's possible to reach them. It might be really, really difficult. You know what I mean? Like, some people are going to be really, really difficult to reach. But now, especially like podcasting, YouTube, these creator sources are like the new media. And we saw that in this past election cycle, not to get political or anything, but the person who did the most podcasts was the person who ended up winning the election. And I think that there's some sort of direct correlation there. And obviously, it isn't that can't be the only or main indicator, but I think it was. I think that if you examine presidential elections, they're typically 5 to 10 years ahead of what businesses start to realize, if that makes sense.
That is a very good way of looking for trends, right? Like Ty Lopez mentions, I'm looking for trends. It's a good place.
Well, yeah, they're spending insane amounts of money on the highest stakes situation possible, which is the presidency. You know what I mean? So when you have that many smart people spending that much money to that degree, it's going to show you some things if you start examining it. And, Obama did the same thing in 2008 with Facebook. They hammered Facebook like crazy. And this was early stages of Facebook. And they did very, very well with that platform and crushed it. You look back even the 60s with certain, I forget which election cycle it was specifically, but they were using TV for the first time, and they were using Kennedy. Yeah, I was going to say Kennedy. I wasn't 100% sure, but yeah, but the point is like when the president uses something to get elected, businesses start going like, maybe we should focus some attention over on these other platforms or forms of marketing that we didn't give any clout to before.
Couple amazing nuggets and viral videos I'm seeing just from the 2 things you gave us. So I have a list here of some of the famous people you've interviewed: Shaquille O'Neal, John Maxwell, Tommy Lauren. And many podcasters dream of landing high-profile guests. What's your approach to getting on the radar of these people? You mentioned that if they have a pulse, but can you go a little bit beyond?
So at the beginning, it's high volume of reach outs. It's just being willing to send the message. And I find that one unlock is just like whenever I've coached people on this, they come to me with this like one of the reasons for not starting a show is like I don't know that many people, and I can't imagine I'm going to be able to get X number of people on my show to be able to have a consistent release schedule. And so during the coaching, I just help them send their first 10 messages.
Okay.
That's it. It's just the belief that if I send enough of these, somebody will say yes. And it's inevitable. Somebody will say yes. It's only a matter of time. You reach out to 50 people a day for an entire month, you're going to get some interviews from it. And you're going to get replies from people that you never thought would actually reply. So I always tell people, like, start with people that are more attainable, that are more like gettable, because you're just going to see more results quickly. And that momentum, I think, is really, really important. Just like getting to a yes is important. So just make a list of people who are like barely outside of the scope of what you would think is possible, but they're not the Shaquille O'Neals. Start with this list of people that's like, oh, this is somebody who I saw speak at that conference this one time, and they were really, really great. They may have 120,000 followers on Instagram or something like that, but they don't have, 35 million. So DM, reach out, see what's up, and then make a list of a bunch of adjacent people like that, and then go reach out to those other people. Try to stay industry specific in a batch of DMs and a batch of reach outs, whether it's DMs on Instagram or tweets on X, or it's cold emails, whatever the method is. Try to start in one industry, because it's much easier to knock off other people in that space once you've gotten the first one or two yeses. Whereas like if you go all over the place, you have like, okay, I got this big, real estate developer. That's super cool. But then if you go from real estate developer to, tech founder, they have no idea who each other are, if that makes sense. Yes. Whereas if you go this real estate developer to this real estate podcaster to this like top producing real estate agent, those odds are much higher that person knows that person, that person knows that person. So when I reach out to the sixth person, and I already have a couple of yeses from these other two people, I can use those as credibility to leverage the fact that like I'm somebody that's worth spending time with. That's really the only question you have to answer, man. It's like people think that they have to have a massive audience. It's like that is not the only factor to get people to spend time with you. There's the main factor is basically anybody who has a lot of demands in their time knows that their time is their most valuable asset. So the question that you have to answer for them is not how big is my audience, it's are you going to waste time by spending that time with me on my show? Now, a big audience is obviously one of those factors, like that's why, Rogan can get whoever he wants because his audience is massive. So when you're reaching that many people, obviously that person knows, well, this is definitely not going to be a waste of time. In fact, this is going to be a fantastic use of my time. And probably there's zero other things on my schedule that would be a better use of time than doing this interview because they know the platform's huge. So that is a factor, but it is one of several factors that goes into whether or not this is going to be a waste of somebody's time. So I just try to think of it from that perspective. Like, what can I do to to ensure that this person believes that spending some of their time with me is not going to be a waste?
Thanks for that. Ivan is taking copious notes. We're getting a nice masterclass here to get this podcast to the next level too. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Could you walk us through one or two of your favorite interviews or most memorable interviews?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard not to say Shaq at the top of the list every time. And it's not just because he's Shaq, it's also because I was a massive Shaq fan. Like, he was like a childhood hero for me. Ooh. So if you walked into my room, like my childhood bedroom, I grew up in LA area. I played a lot of basketball. The Lakers were my favorite team, and Shaq's my favorite player on the Lakers at the time. So I had like jerseys. I had a mural like painted on my wall of Shaq backing down Ben Wallace in the playoffs. Bobbleheads, basketball cards, like all that kind of stuff. So I was a big Shaq fan growing up. And then, Shaq shoes that I wore all the time from Payless. Those were the shit. So I was just a big Shaq fan, and then I remained that way because as I was evolving in my life, he continued to evolve post career, if that makes sense. So like I started getting more into like business, podcasting, and things like that, and then he is just a really respectable businessman.
He's a beast.
Respectable father. lives his life by a core set of values. He's like a kind person. He makes a difference in his communities. Like he went back to school and got a doctorate after he was in the NBA. Like that, you don't see that kind of stuff happen very often. So I had a lot of respect for him outside of basketball as well. So when I got to do that interview, man, it was a really, really cool full circle moment for me, because I was always a massive fan of his. So that one was a lot of fun. And other than that, man, there's been so many other, like it's hard to say what are the other ones that meant that much to me, because there's dozens and dozens of people who I just never thought would sit down with me, and now I can text them and they're friends, so it's been pretty cool.
How many followers did you have at the time when you had
when I had Shaq?
You had Shaq.
I was a few years into the podcast at this point, so probably like 5 years in. So I don't remember the exact numbers, maybe getting like 70, 80,000 downloads a month or something on my podcast at the time. So it was not big by any means. No, not at all. It was more just like I made some good connections with other people, and got a connection to Shaq's team and vetted it, and they were like, all right, sure, let's do it.
It's very interesting that you said that many followers, that there aren't that much. And I was seeing, one of the things that we're noticing is that it's a lot harder these days to get followers. I don't know if you agree that it's the most expensive currency on social media right now. That's my experience or my interpretation of it. But you see these memes that show you 20,000 people and it's a whole stadium, like 1,000 people, and it's a concert hall.
Yeah.
2,000 people, so much. And like 80,000 is no joke. 80,000 people is two Allegiant stadiums easily.
Yeah.
So
it's a good reframe. I had this wallpaper downloaded on my phone from Gary Vee when I first launched my podcast as a reminder, and all it was 1 greater than 0. And the perspective was that even from starting the show was like, if I have one person listening to my content, that is far better than 0 people listening to my content. And if you don't treat the audience at that size the way that you would treat your audience if 100,000 people were listening, then you're never going to get to the 100,000 people. It's the people who treat the audience of 3 like it's a massive global audience that end up doing really well, because they're focused on the product that person's getting instead of focusing on the people that they don't have listening. And that, media is a product. The podcast is a product. You know what I mean? Like, you are competing for attention, which is arguably the number one thing that people have to give. And they could spend that attention not just on other podcasts, but they could also spend that attention listening to music in the car. Like, you're not just competing with other podcasters, is my point. Like, you're also competing with Drake. You're also competing with Ed Sheeran. You're also competing with Taylor Swift. You're also competing with Netflix, Amazon, Prime, Hulu. There's unlimited ways that people can give their attention to things these days. So if you want to grab some of their attention for a second, you have to build a good enough product that's actually worth paying attention to and listening to. And the people who focus on making that their kind of true north from the beginning and being appreciative and grateful for the 3 people that are listening are the people that are going to, be able to expand that audience.
Dude, you gave me goosebumps on that whole answer. It's like, thank you, man. That's just pure gold. Ivan's still taking notes here. Amazing. All right, man. So a lot of podcasters struggle with monetizing their show. How did you create a profitable podcasting model? Was it through sponsorships, affiliates, events?
So the original intention was sponsorships. That was like all I knew at the time, which was what most people think probably when they think of podcasting is sponsorships. And I quickly realized that the audience growth piece was not as linear as I thought it was going to be. And I was still doing door-to-door at the time, and I wanted to stop doing that. So I went the other direction and started building products and services that would correlate to the topics of conversation I would have on the show. And then I started selling those products and services back to the audience. So for the first year or so, I had a Calendly link that I would give a call to action to in the intro of my show and then throughout the conversations on the podcast. And I would send people that link and I would say, like, if you want to jump on a free, no agenda, one-on-one, 10, 15-minute phone call with me, just click this link. I probably did over 100 just free one-on-one calls with people in my audience. Anybody who would take the time to like jump on a call and describe to me like how they heard about the show, what their number one struggle was when it came to the topic that I was talking about, which for me at the time was networking, relationship building. Okay. And then once I had enough people that I had talked to, I had enough information to be able to build a service that would solve the problems that people were telling me about the most. And then all it was after that is just offering that solution, because like it's something called the ask method. It's like you build an audience around a topic. You have no idea how to monetize it. You're not coming in with some sort of agenda to bring people into this thing. You build an audience and then you ask that audience what they want. And then you build the exact thing that they told you that they wanted, and then you sell it back to them. Like it's not, you're not trying to force something down somebody's throat. You're literally creating value from something that they told you from their own mouth was a problem that they're experiencing. So that's all of the market research that you need to know that like, okay, well, this product probably will get at least some legs once we launch it. So the first $1 that I ever made from this was I jumped on one of those free phone calls with a guy, and he was asking me what the next steps were, or whatever, what I was creating in the background. I was like, right now it's nothing, but I've been thinking about putting together a course on networking and relationships. And he was like, oh, cool. How much are you going to charge for the course? And I was like, I don't know, probably like, $200. It's not going to be anything crazy. I just want to like put it out there. And he goes, check your phone. So I pull up my phone. He PayPal'd me $200 for the course that I had not built yet. And I was like, okay, well, that's kind of crazy. That was the easiest sale I've ever made, because I come from door-to-door sales, which is like the dead opposite, like cold open, knocking on somebody's door. Not only are they not expecting you, they don't want you there. And then I have to convince them that they have a need for the product that I'm selling and then sell it to them before I leave their house. Like wildly different sale than me jumping on a free phone call with a guy who's listened to hours of my content and him going like, please create something so that I can pay you. You know what I mean? And that was the first $1 that I made. I ended up not doing the course. So I did some research and I was like, I think a mastermind would be a better solution to the problem right now. Basically like building up a group of people, bringing in speakers and having information be given out. It went with the connection idea. It solves the networking problem. Like you need relationships, like come into this group with some other cool people.
So it's still an information product.
Yeah.
In many ways. Yeah.
Still an info product. And I called this other guy back and I was like, hey man, just want to give you a heads up. I'm not going to do the course. I'm going to send you this money back. I really appreciate the vote of confidence. And he's like, well, what are you doing instead? And I was like, well, it's going to be a mastermind, probably about 3 months. We're just going to do like a 3-month trial mastermind, get some people in there, do X, Y, Z. It'll be $1,000 for the 3 months. And so he goes, check your phone again. So I checked my phone. He sent me the difference between the $200 and $1,000. So he sent me, whatever it was, $797 or something, whatever, weird dollar amount I was charging. So he sent me the difference to be like the first member of the mastermind. And I was like, okay, well, this is pretty cool. So that ended up being my first product, was a mastermind. I didn't make any money on that. I had like 6 or 7 people on it, sold them for $1,000. I spent all of the money that I made from the mastermind, like back into the mastermind just to try to make it really, really good. And then I launched a second one that was $500 a month for 6 months. And then that one was like the first profitable thing that I did that was like, okay, well, now I can actually start making a little bit of money doing this. And then that led to, again, more asking questions. What do people want from me? That led into one-on-one podcast coaching, because there's a lot of people in the mastermind that were like, how did you do the podcast? I want to do a podcast. So I was like, okay, sure, I'll teach you exactly what I did, exactly how I got this whole thing set up. And the first ever podcast coaching client I had paid me, I think, $1,500 for 8 weeks of one-on-one coaching. And then by the time I was done doing that, the last 3 or 4 people paid me $15,000 for 4 months of coaching. So it was a little bit longer, but it was 10 times the amount of money that I did on the first one. So it was just a constant evolving of like, what are people consistently asking me for that I can build a product or service that helps solve those problems. So it wasn't, rocket science. And it wasn't me coming in with like a preconceived idea of like, I have this thing I want to sell. How do I sell it? It was like, I have this topic I want to talk about. how do I get people interested in that topic? How do I add value to them for free through the podcast? And then what's the problems they're continuing to come up against that I can help shortcut the solution to, and then build something that actually helps them solve that problem. And that was what enabled me to like step away from door to door completely and move into like the podcasting online world full time.
I love the way you did it. I don't know if you bred $100 million leads. Mm-hmm. So that's where you start, free.
Yep.
Talking to your people, ask, and then there's the launch method. It was an old school kind of like ask framework. Mm-hmm. I really like that. But you had the grit to go through and build an audience, right? I mean, it didn't come free. Because people, I don't know if you run into in the business coaching world, because I see it, I go to all these seminars and stuff. It's been a while since I have. But they want the easy pill, right?
Yeah,
I've been doing this for God knows how many years.
Yeah.
Is there any key metrics or success criteria that you look at to determine if a podcast is effectively growing?
It's tough because everybody has different goals. Especially if you're a business owner or entrepreneur, like your goal could very well just be lead gen or trust with audience you already have, and a podcast can be a great way to further that and build that deeper with your audience, even if it's a small, audience. But then you have some people who are doing a sports podcast, and their goal is to just have, millions of listeners so that they can get sponsors and go to sporting events for free with a press pass. So it's difficult to nail down because not everybody's version of success is the same. But for a while, like in our business, it wasn't really necessarily about podcast growth. It was more about business growth. Like, how do we get more people into this, product that we're selling at this point? And then now it's much more correlated to download growth because we're back focused into the podcast itself, like increasing downloads, increasing sponsorship revenue, increasing affiliate deals, increasing emails to our newsletter. Like we're really trying to focus on building more of a media company at this point, which is 100% dependent on the number of eyeballs that you can get, So it's a little bit different of a business model now, but I started out with just the business side.
That's very cool. And then now you're working on a whole nother thing called Guestio.
So I actually recently just stepped away from Guestio. So we're actually offloading that this year. So at the beginning of this year, we decided to cut ties with Guestio and go into the podcasting full time, which is why the rebrand happened. So when we did the rebrand, we were just like, we know we need more ad inventory to be able to sell on the podcast because we were only doing like 1 or 2 episodes a week. So we immediately went to 7 days a week releases on the Travis Makes Money podcast, and then focused it back into the business niche because it's easier to monetize a niche podcast than it is to monetize a broad podcast. And it's easier to build the audience with a niche topic than it is to do a broad topic. So we switched back to this like daily entrepreneur interview content on Travis Makes Money for that specific purpose. So we actually stepped away from Guestio. But yeah, we spent about 3-4 years working on that one. It was a software project, but also we did a lot of agency work, like placing guests on podcasts, both representing shows and getting them guests, and then representing guests and getting them booked on shows. And we did that for a number of years as well. So
cool, man. Cool. So if someone's watching a podcast or looking to level up their content game, what immediate actions would you recommend they take?
To start a podcast?
Yeah, right. Launching, okay. I guess, or in the first, whatever. I hear how many, like, there's podcasts that don't even finish the 5th episode, right?
You know what 90% of podcasters don't make it past episode 10.
Wow.
So there's actually a term in the industry called pod fade to describe the volume, like mass volume of shows that just stopped releasing episodes. And it makes sense. It's difficult. You know what I mean? It's a lot of work. It's a lot of energy. Yeah, that's right. That's right. You guys did. That's really my number one piece of advice to people when they're starting. That's why I said that before we hit record, is like batching is the key to consistency. Because if you can start with 10 episodes in the bank before you launch, then you've already made it to the top 10% of shows that have ever existed. You know what I mean? So I recommend people start with a bank of episodes rather than just one or two. Get started doing something and then batch up enough to keep you ahead of a release schedule that you're going to commit to doing for a long period of time regardless. So when I started, it was like, I'm doing 3 interviews a week for 2 years, period. And then after that, I'll take a step back and examine whether or not I want to continue doing this, or maybe I should change it up a little bit or take a pivot. But for 2 years, I'm doing nothing but this thing, because I think you can get lost in the sauce and looking at the numbers all the time and drive yourself crazy, being like, man, this isn't taking off. It's not growing like crazy. It's not, And so, and in the nature of podcasting too, is like, it's the last platform that exists for the purpose of long form content consumption. Like no other platform does that, not even YouTube anymore. Everybody's optimizing short form because of TikTok. And podcasting is the last one that's long form. It's also the last one that's really bad with discoverability. So the odds of a podcast episode going viral versus like a clip of a podcast on TikTok going viral is almost zero. Like a podcast episode going viral is almost unheard of. Like it's really, really, really difficult. So the growth is never like this big jump on the podcasting side. In my experience, it's always just been like you get a little uptick and then you plateau, and you get a little uptick and then you plateau. You just hope that the plateau is a little bit higher than the last plateau. And just staying in the game is the metric that people need to optimize for, I think.
Wow. We're doing it here. Where do you see podcasting headed in the next 3-5 years? Are we nearing peak? Are we nearing peak podcast? Or is there still plenty of room?
I think there's plenty of room, man. And I've really tried to think about this from an objective perspective, because I obviously have some bias in doing this because I've been doing it for so long and I want it to do well in the future. But I also think the data backs it up. There's still a projected CAGR, compound annual growth rate. It's still double digits. So it's like 10, 12% compound annual growth rate expected to be a multi-billion-dollar industry by 2030. With advertisings and things like that. Listenership is growing every single year. More and more people are listening to podcasts, and I don't think that's going away. So that's why I say I don't think podcasts is going anywhere, because it still scratches an itch in the content world that no one else is scratching right now, which is the long form consumption. Like I said, every other platform optimizes for quick dopamine hits, but there's still going to be a demand for long form conversations that don't get interrupted every 30 seconds or every 3 seconds by swiping to a new video. So I just think it's going to take the place of radio in a much more like final way in the next decade or so. There's still a lot of people from older generations that listen to radio instead of podcasting. But even then, people that I've been telling about podcasts for the last 7 years started listening like 6 months ago. And a lot of it had to do with the election cycle, where they were starting to realize that like, oh, this election is taking place on this other platform that I've never tried. I've heard a lot of cool things about it, but I've never tried it before. They started tuning into those episodes for the first time ever, because it was the only place where they could actually hear the full long form conversation with the particular candidate that they were hoping that they could hear more from. So they were kind of forced to listen to it, because even on television, they don't get that type of content, that type of time with those candidates. They answer in 3 to 5 minute synopses all the time. If they're lucky, like that's a long segment. Most of the time it's 30 seconds, 60 seconds. So I don't think that the need or the desire for this type of content is going to go anywhere. I just think that it's going to start moving more and more people from radio and things like that over into podcasting. And then podcasting and YouTube now are like the same thing essentially. Like if you have a podcast, it's got to go on YouTube, because more podcasts are consumed on YouTube than any other platform still. Which is pretty crazy, because when I started, it was almost like opposition to each other. It was like, are you going to start a podcast or are you going to start a YouTube channel? So for a long time, I didn't even record video. All of my interviews were done over Skype, and they were done audio only. Rest in peace, Skype. Recently got shut down, which is crazy. It makes me feel old that I was using it for a long time, but I used Skype for probably 2 years, and we didn't even record the video. Like it would just be an audio call. And at the time, it was just like, well, if we do it on video, then you forget that you might do a gesture and not explain the gesture to the listeners. So so we would just shut off the video and do it audio only, so that I knew 100%. Like if they were doing something, I'd be like, oh, we can't see you. You know what I mean? Like explain to us what you're doing, because the listeners can't see you either. So we did audio only for like 2 years. Like it was very much like these platforms are kind of in opposition to each other. Now they go together, and YouTube has its own like podcasting section now, and you can submit your RSS feed just like a regular podcast platform does. So now that there's more access to podcasts, I don't see that they're going to go away anytime soon. I just think they're going to keep growing. I think listenership's going to keep growing.
Well, thank you. You have any advice for us about the podcast?
You're doing the right things, man. You're doing the right things. Just keep doing it and keep learning. You know, I tell people like consistency is the name of the game, but it's also just the barrier to entry. So I know a lot of people who've been really, really, really consistent, painfully consistent for even longer than I have, who are still just stuck at the same place that they were back when I started. So they are consistent, but they're not consistently improving. And I think that there's a big difference between those two things. So it's not just about like, well, let's put out content every week. It's like, cool, but what are you doing to like make that content better? Like are you jumping on calls with your audience? Are you trying to engage people? Are you trying to see what you can do better? Are you thinking about the guest lineup that you have? Like, it's not just about releasing another episode next week. It's about releasing another episode next week that's like a little bit better than the episode that you released this week. And if you do that consistently over time, then you're going to see some growth. You know what I mean?
Okay, so consistency in doing it, and then consistency in improvement.
Yeah, and willingness to change and pivot along the way. You know, like the thing is, Think about the volume of content that's being put out by people with shit tons of money every single year. You look at all the streaming platforms, Netflix, Disney Plus, Hulu, Paramount Plus, HBO Max, Amazon Prime. Then you look at television, CBS, NBC, and all these other places. Then you look at movie studios and all the content that they put out. They have millions of dollars that they invest, at least hundreds of thousands that they invest into every single project that they do. A lot of them will never even make it to air. They will never even get put out.
You just have to spend it.
Because they're spending all this money to validate concepts, and then they put it in front of a test audience and it doesn't do what they wanted it to do, so they scrap it before it even goes live. Even though they've already ordered a season of the show. They've filmed 8 episodes. It costs them $650,000 to film that, first bank of episodes or whatever. And this is like a low end budget, right?
And it's a line item for that. That's
right. And it still doesn't work. And then these are the shows that get scrapped. Then they have the shows that they actually take to the market and put them out, and they still don't do well, and they don't even order a second season. Or they order a second season, but they don't order a third season. You know what I mean? Like, my point is to say that, even the people whose job it is to get attention for a living, who have massive budgets to be able to put that content in front of people, even then, they still don't have hits on their hands every time. You know what I'm saying? So, what's the odds that, you sitting in your spare bedroom in your apartment with a microphone are going to, nail it first time out of the gate? That, this content's going to be awesome and people are going to love it and it's going to take off. What are the odds it's going to happen? It's, almost zero. So, if you're not willing to learn, change, pivot, grow along the way, then that's how you end up with a show that is 15 years old that nobody listens to still or nobody pays attention to still because you were never willing to take any sort of, other risks or have any other sort of other segments or content that you're trying out or testing all the time. That's what makes Gary Vee so good at what he does. It's he's just constantly throwing out a crazy amount of volume of content and constantly trying new forms of content. So you can always see there's a lagging volume of content that comes from people like Gary Vee, because he'll find a new format and then he'll start doing that format, and then you see thousands of accounts being that's working for Gary, let's do that. And it's well, it's not just the thing it's not just that's working for Gary, it's that he tested 20 other things before that thing did well, and then he did more of that thing that did well. So people start doing that thing and it doesn't work as well for them. It's well, because you're the,
it's not Gary.
You're the 348,000th person to start using this format again. That's why you saw, after Alex Hormozi blew up, he mentioned his book earlier. After he blew up, you saw so many people that were like, we'll do Hormozy style content for you, blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, that's fine, but it doesn't mean it's going to work. You know what I mean? Like, because he's Alex Hormozy and you're not. Not to say that like he's better or you're worse or anything like that. It's just, it's different. And the thing that works for people like that is that they just consistently test and put out an insane volume of stuff and then do more of the things that work and do less of the things that don't work. So people look at the things that work and they go, well, that's the solution. I'll just do that thing because it works. And it's like, well, it works for them. You know, like you have to constantly be testing and trying and doing new things to figure out what works for you. Or else you're going to always be playing from way behind.
Travis, so at the end, is this worth it? All the work you've done so far to create the audience you have?
That's a good question, man. I think about that a lot. And I do believe it's worth it because not just of the audience and like, you know, sponsorship revenue and stuff like that is cool, but it's more just all of the other benefits that have come from having the show, which is, first of all, I think it's made me a smarter person, not just because I've been able to have the conversations with people that are way smarter than me and I get to ask them the questions that I want to ask, but also because I feel like a debt to my audience to provide the best possible content that I can. So it's forced me to be an avid learner. You know, like I read 20, 25 books a year, which is something that if you would have told me that I would do when I was like 19, I'd have been like, yeah, right, that's not happening, you know? But
yeah, because you didn't have Ty Lopez telling you book a day, book a day.
I hated reading. It was a running joke in my family that like Travis would never pick up a book. So to go from that to what I do now is wildly different. But like I said, I feel like I owe my audience. Like if I'm gonna put my opinion out there, I want it to be as well informed as I can, essentially. So I'm just constantly listening to podcasts. I'm listening to audiobooks. I'm reading books. I'm consuming information around the things that I talk about the most because I think that it is going to provide better content for the people that are listening. So it's made me smarter through multiple channels. It's made me more empathetic because I have conversations with a wide variety of people from a wide variety of backgrounds and I get insights into their lives and how they lived. And it's made me a better communicator. It's made me more empathetic toward people. It's given me more perspective on the world in general. It inspired me to live a better life because I get to have conversations with extraordinary people all the time, which is not something that happens in day-to-day life ordinarily. You know what I mean? Like you don't just get to have awesome conversations with people who are crushing it in life as a part of regular life, like in the Starbucks line. It's just the volume of those people is really, really low, you know? So when you have a place where you get to spend time with those people, you get to learn a lot and sharpen yourself significantly. And then the network piece has been incredible. Yeah, just like the sheer number of people that I can now, it doesn't always turn into a friendship. It doesn't always turn into like being able to text them afterwards or whatever, you know, it doesn't always turn into that, but sometimes it does. And when you've put out over 1,000 episodes like I have, that ends up being like quite a few people that you can contact who you know are going to contact you back, who have done some really cool things in the world. And that doesn't hurt anybody having that type of...
Because you're memorable enough, that factor of having this.
Yeah. And which speaks to how you also have to take advantage of the opportunity once you get it. Because there's a lot of people who get their foot in the door and then fumble the bag during the interview because they don't prep. It's not good. They're stumbling over their words. They don't know anything about the person. Like they take the opportunity to connect with somebody and then squander it because they thought that just the connection was like the thing. It's like, well, it's not the thing because they get interviewed all the time. So what are you going to do to stand out? How are you going to provide a better conversation? So they leave that conversation being like, that was impactful. Like that, Travis guy's up to something. You know what I mean? Like I can't quite put my finger on it. I don't really know much about him, but like that was fun. You know, he came prepared. Like there's something about this person that makes me want to continue to connect with them. And like I said, I'm sure I've fumbled the bag more times than I realize, and not had as good of a conversation as I could have. But you know, when you've talked to as many people as I have, like I said, and do the work to make sure that it's as good a conversation as you can, it inevitably leads to long-term future connection with some of those people.
And that's invaluable. So, given all this context, you said it was worth it and everything. Let me take all that audience away from you. Let me put you in another dimension or another planet. But you still have the knowledge. What would you be doing? What would you start? What would you do? Like, I'm taking you to zero right now.
Yeah. Probably something very similar to what I did. I would do something in sales to make money, because I know podcasting doesn't make money day one. So I would probably do some form of selling, high ticket selling, something that would allow me to have some sort of freedom or flexibility over my calendar, but also give me the ability to make six figures or multiple six figures. And then I would take some of the extra money and dump it into starting a podcast again. I would just start over and
So
do another one.
you would bet on podcasting.
Yeah, for me specifically. Yeah, it's not just because of like, oh, the industry this and timing that. It's more just like, I know that I like it. So if I can work, like those are my favorite side hustles. My favorite side hustles are ones that you can do in your spare time after you're done working, bringing home the bacon, doing whatever it is that you do. But then the time that you're spending on the side hustle is time that you really, really enjoy. Not something that feels like more work after you just got done with work. That type of side hustle is really cool to me, and something that's infinitely scalable if it ends up taking off or doing well. And that to me is a podcast, because you could make an extra $700 a month just getting some sponsors or doing something like that. Or you could do it full time, and you look at some people that are making, millions of dollars a year doing the show, and they have extremely low overhead. Content's one of those 4 C's of leverage that Naval Ravikant talks about all the time. And because some of these like people who have a massive audience, it doesn't cost them any more to produce the show just because their audience is larger. They have their cost to produce, and that's it. So anything they make in addition to that is all gross profit margin. It doesn't cost anything additional.
You're not doing exponential changes like Mr. Beast bringing in a car or whatever.
Yeah, right.
I mean, there's only so far.
Right. They're spending, whatever it is. Like they might have their fixed expenses of that might grow a little bit as you get better. Maybe you invest in studio time. Maybe you invest in a full-time producer. Maybe you have several social media people working for you, whatever. But like that team or that expense is never going to rise in direct correlation to the income potential of the show. So like it might go from costing you, $15,000 a year when you start to maybe 150 or 250 grand a year as you continue growing, because you have so many people that are cutting clips or working on this thing or doing outreach or whatever. But once you get past that, like little initial growth phase where like you're happy with the product that you have, once you hit that threshold, the income is exponential in terms of what it's capable of, and your expenses do not have to increase at all, because this is the cost to produce an episode of the show, and this is the potential that episode has to be able to bring in. So I really like business models like that have infinite scalability, that in my free time I can use it to do something that I actually really enjoy doing. And then, if it takes off, great. If it doesn't, I'm not upset about the time that I took to do it, because I still really enjoy doing it.
Bro, you just gave me a whole nother perspective of what you're doing. I really, really thank you. Want to go into a rapid fire section of the show?
Let's do it.
So, other than Shaq, who was your most unexpectedly insightful or fun guest, and why?
I'd say James Murray, who we're releasing in a couple of weeks. He's from The Impractical Jokers, a TV show that I watched a lot growing up. And yeah, just really, really enjoyable conversation, really cool guy. One of those guys that connected with me a lot afterwards that I was really excited about doing. He had the Impractical, still has the Impractical Jokers on True TV, which they've been running for, 10 years now, 11 years, something like that. But then he also writes a bunch of books, like novels, and then 2 of his books are being adapted into movies right now. So I find that stuff really fascinating. He's a super, super cool guy.
And only sitting down with a guy and talking, that's when those things come out, right?
Yep.
Cool. What's your morning routine or daily habit that keeps you productive?
I don't have much of a morning routine anymore. When I first started, I was like bullish on that and was just like, oh, this is what everybody does. And then I started like interviewing more people on my show and asking that question a lot. And the number of people that were just like, I don't have one, was like started being surprising to me, because at first it was framed to me like everybody has one. Why don't you have one? And then it basically just got down to the fact that like everybody's different, and it's going to look different for everybody. And if you're so tied to a specific morning routine, it can actually be a detriment to your productivity, because even if you had a really productive day, like I would catch myself being like, but I didn't meditate or I didn't journal, or I didn't like write my affirmations or whatever the fuck, you know, I'm sorry, whatever you're doing. You know, so even though I had a really productive day, it felt like I didn't because I missed these 2 items in my morning routine this morning. Darn, I guess I can wake up and try again tomorrow. Today was a bad day. You know what I mean? It's like, well, it's not necessarily true. You know, it was actually a really productive day. Like I did like the core things that I needed to do. So I'm a fan of like doing whatever it is that you feel like you need to be doing, but don't put too many things in there because you're going to set yourself up for failure. And then you're going to get out of productivity before you're even got the day started because you think that you already screwed up by not completing your 2.5 hour morning routine with your cold plunge and your sauna and your book and your journal and your all the other things that you've told yourself you needed. When in reality, probably what you needed was just to get up and work, you know what I mean? Like just do the things that actually need to be done and do them first, you know? So I think there's a lot more value to that than there is to having this insanely structured morning routine, whatever that may be.
Very cool. That's a good meta question for you. Thank you for that. Favorite books or podcasts you're listening to or reading right now?
Ah, man. One of the books that I would just recommend to everybody to just have on your shelf constantly, and I already mentioned his name, is The Almanac of Naval Ravikant. Naval is just one of those guys who he not only has built real things and done a bunch of really cool stuff in the world, built multiple companies, scaled multiple companies. He also has a really great mind for distilling that information and offering it to people in a digestible way, which is not always the case. Sometimes you have people who are really smart, who've done so many cool things in the world, but they don't know how to communicate the principles to other people. They can't dissect the information and share it very well. And I think Naval is very, very crafty at both of those things. And so I listen to his stuff a lot. And the Almanac of Naval Ravikant was actually not written by him. It was written by Eric Jorgensen. It's just a compilation of a bunch of the writings that he's put out over the years. So it kind of almost reads like Marcus Aurelius, the Meditations, where it's just kind of like short, entries, like almost just tweet after tweet after tweet, just a compilation of those things. So I highly recommend anybody picking up a copy of that one. Like it's broken down into 2 sections. One of them success, the other one's happiness. And he writes about both of them very, very intelligently.
Did you just watch his Chris Williamson interview?
I actually, I'm about 30 minutes in right now, actually. Yeah, he's great, man. I like his stuff a lot. And Chris is a great interviewer, too.
Good stuff, man. Good stuff. What is one major misconception people have about podcasting or networking?
Podcasting that is too saturated. There's like, everybody has a podcast. And you think that that's true just because you see them all over the place. But in reality, it's the least saturated content platform of every single one of them. So there's over 4.5 million total indexed podcasts in existence. Less than 400,000 of them are actively releasing episodes. So you're only competing with 400,000 other people, which I say only, but you compare that to Instagram where there's 2 billion users, or YouTube where there's 50 million plus channels, or blogs that there's 500 million of, or writing a book that millions of books come out every single year. You look at the competition on podcasting, it's actually still very much in its infancy.
Wow. And I mean, is there really going to be like tens of millions of people that are going to put whatever it takes? You and I know. I'm just getting a taste of it. It's not for everyone. Right?
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. Like, I don't know what it's going to look like in 10 years in terms of active podcasts. I have to assume it'll be a lot more than it is now, because people start just realizing the value of having one, in addition to just the audience piece of it. So I think it'll continue to grow, for sure. But right now, it's still the least saturated of every platform that you can start.
Cool things. All right. So we're going to the closing part of the show. What's next for you, man? Any upcoming projects, any events and stuff that we should know about?
Yeah, dude, right now it's just focusing back in on the podcasts themselves. I'm just trying to make the content better all the time. We're releasing daily episodes on Travis Makes Money for entrepreneurship content, and then we have weekly episodes coming out on Travis Makes Friends. So, yeah, that's the main focus right now.
Cool. And for those wishing to launch their podcast or want to book big guests, how can they reach out to you?
Instagram's probably good, at Travis Chappell on Instagram, Chappell. You can just DM me there.
Yeah, you're super active there.
Do my best.
Yeah, that's actually, Ivan got in contact with you from having a very personalized DM video.
Yep.
Which Very few people are still willing to do these days. Archer, I'm gonna start implementing that.
You got to do what doesn't scale in order to be able to scale, you know.
You gotta do what doesn't scale in order
Yeah.
to be able to scale. Wow. Cool, man. Thanks for sharing your story, all your insights. We wish you the best with these 2 podcasts. And we're looking forward to seeing what's next. Thank you for being a Vegas Voice, brother.
Appreciate it, Sergio. Thanks for having me, man. It's great.